G'day there, welcome back to the Star Wars Radio Hour. My name is Hannah, and this is the show where we have Star Wars conversations with Star Wars creatives. Today I'm joined by Luke Kellett, who's a fellow Australian Star Wars content creator, but also an expert collector. He's going to be showing us his fantastic museum-like collection of Star Wars props and figures. If you are listening to the audio version of this conversation, I definitely recommend just checking out his social media just to get an impressive idea of his collection. But we dive into everything from prop making and the history of that with Star Wars, as well as his fantastic collection and how can you start your very own impressive Star Wars collection. Let's get into this conversation. I am here with my good friend Luke, who is a fellow Australian. Thank God I found another Star Wars Australian to chat with. Yeah, I found you. And we've already met in person, but hey, Luke, how you doing?
Life. Good, Han. How are you going? Thanks for having me.
I am so excited that you are here. And again, the most exciting part of this is that we have met in real life, and so much of Star Wars fandom is done online.
Yeah,
and we're in the same country at least,
same
which is
time zone, which is amazing.
Zone. Oh, helpful as anything. It's so good. It's so good.
So great.
But you,
yeah.
my friend, are a master collector. And that is what we're going to be chatting all about today. And we're going to get down to business about Star Wars collecting, because if there's a professional sport of Star Wars collecting, you will be in the Olympics, my friend. Oh my God. We can even collect. Start to see in the background there your collection, even just parts of it. That isn't all of it. But let's jump in. And I've done enough yapping already, but let's hear about Star Wars collecting. That is your thing.
Yeah, it is.
Take it away. How did you get into this?
Yeah, it's been my thing for a while. Hey, I like collecting things. So I'm a photographer by profession. And photography is kind of like collecting. So you kind of collect images, particularly with the type of work that I do with like portraiture. So I think this need of like curating and collecting things has always kind of been part of me. And then the Star Wars side of things was from my dad when I was very, very young. I watched Star Wars, when I was like 3 or 4, so the early 90s. And I got to watch Return of the Jedi and got really into filmmaking and movie making, and really seeing, for me with Star Wars, like all the creatures and the puppets and all the behind the scenes making of videos and things like that just really kind of opened me up to the whole world of not just Star Wars and the universe in the movies, but then all the VFX stuff and the camera work and that whole amazing crew of people that kind of reinvented cinema. So for me, like Star Wars it's not just a kick-ass show with amazing stories and narratives. It's a whole awakening for my creative work throughout my career, which has been really cool. And then finding over probably been about a decade now of kind of like collecting pieces that kind of mean something to me from the franchise and from the different makers that have kind of worked at ILM or various things, has been a real joy to curate what is kind of like a little mini museum now.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
I think when I visited that actual room that we're in right now,
Yeah.
I think that was probably one of the first things I said, that this is like a museum of artifacts for Star Wars fans. It's such an excellent piece. So yeah, museum. That's a good word for it.
Yeah, and I really enjoy that too. Like, I think we were just talking offline a minute ago. I was saying how awesome your collection is starting to look in the background. But I think for me, it's like I have quite a lot of collectibles, but I don't have as many as like a lot of collectors that have been collecting as long. A lot of people collect a lot more volume. I've just allowed a lot of space in between for each piece. So, where I could fit 12 helmets, there's 3, and they're just lit in a certain way. And I think the curation and the lighting and the design, and we were talking about the tweaking, the permanently changing things.
It's like
That
a
is,
dopamine hit every time. It's so good.
it is. It really is. And so, I think with photography, obviously, is like a big passion and interest of mine too, like learning how to light spaces and, the difference between like ambient lighting in a room and accent lighting of pieces, and how you can use spotlights to create drama and like tell little narrative stories of collectibles. So I love it. I am a mega nerd when it comes to displaying as well as collecting.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Let's take us on this journey of, how this has started. As you said, you've been a
Yeah.
Star Wars fan since a young kid.
Yep.
But, take us through the first few pieces that really got you going and thought, hey, this could actually build on something. I'm going to get something else. What was
Yeah.
the first few pieces?
So I've been, for the last couple of years, I've been running a Facebook group with a bunch of friends of mine the group is called the Hyperdrive, and it was founded by this amazing German guy who's now one of my best friends called Christian.
Wow.
And it was essentially a collecting group that was founded in about 2018. And during the pandemic, it kind of exploded when everyone was locked indoors and started to, go online and meet each other. And this kind of Facebook group was a big, big part of that. And then subsequently, like another admin on there is George, who you probably know. He runs the Hyperdrive YouTube channel that I contribute to there, and various other, he's done some amazing things. So the latter half of my collecting journey has definitely been around like a really great group of friends that I've made from around the world, which I know you've had similar experiences with other people. Yeah. And your comment around like meeting in real life, it's really weird because like I have these super close relationships with these people all around the world that I have never met.
Right?
And
yeah.
They're like really wonderful friendships. Like they are, and there's a lot of beautiful things that come with it. There's a lot of challenging things, and it's sometimes really sad that you can't go and have a beer and hang out and, just be there for one another. But yeah, meeting you in real life was a real weird novelty. And the fact that we live so close in Australia as well is just wild. So the latter half of my collecting journey is around that. But how it started was as a kid. So I was too young to have the privilege of having vintage Kenner toys as a kid. So,
right. Yeah.
That era had long passed. So I was born in the late 80s, and that had disappeared. But we had these monstrosities of toys called Power of the Force toys, and they're basically like Star Wars figures, but looks like they've just been injected with a bunch of steroids, and they're just like giant, like Luke Skywalker's like He-Man.
Oh yeah, that's right. They're like bulky. I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah, gotcha.
So I grew up, that was my Star Wars toys. So I had the Power of the Force toys, and the first Star Wars collectible that I had was a speeder bike. So Return of the Jedi Scout Trooper speeder bike. And this thing was really cool because when you threw it on the floor, it like exploded, where you press like a spring, the whole thing like exploded like in the movies. And you had to spend like 30 minutes trying to piece this thing back together.
Right.
But that was my first Star Wars collectible. And then there was a big hiatus in the mid 90s with not much going on in the Star Wars world, be it releases or toy production or anything like that. But I, when I turned like 8, 9, 10, I started rewatching Star Wars. So my gap was probably less than a lot of people's, because by 96, 97, I was rewatching all these movies for the first time, and then getting obsessed with all this behind the scenes stuff. And then in 99, my first Star Wars experience at the cinema was going to see The Phantom Menace.
Yeah.
Which blew my mind. Like, at that point, it's like 11-year-old Luke is, just frothing at the mouth to see like Darth Maul and everything that happened there. So, lots of collecting happened that period. Like, I think it's the largest amount of collectibles that have ever been made for any franchise happened around the Phantom Menace and before it. Like, they just went bananas with entire takeovers of shops that were just stacked to the rafters. Even before anyone had seen the movies, there was all these characters and things you could buy.
Yeah.
And then I had a little break. And then as I started to develop in my creative career as a photographer, I started, meeting peers and people that worked in the industry. So I worked in film and photography, producing and assisting on sets. And I made a lot of really great friends that worked in art departments and the prop departments. So I started hanging out with a lot of people that actually now work for Lucasfilm, like on the sets, on the movies, on the shows, in the art departments, running, wardrobe or props or anything like that. So my collecting, I would say the latter half of my journey through the hyperdrive has been equally matched by peers and friends that work for the movies and may or may not help make me certain things that they may or may not do.
You cannot confirm nor deny that involvement.
But yeah, so and then as part of the hyperdrive Facebook group, we started commissioning artists to make prop replicas. So all the helmets that you see up here, or the Mando bucket, they're all commissioned by the hyperdrive. We kind of co-op together, let's say 50 or 60 people that really want a very, very, very accurate replica. We will find either the artist that worked on the show to produce it, or someone that works in that department, or someone that is, has references or friends that work there and is a really great prop maker themselves. And we will get them to make replicas of the items that they worked on. And really cool, what's been really cool with that, obviously, like we had all the SAG-AFTRA strikes last year in America, but, we contributed an awful lot by commissioning these artists to keeping people employed or keeping their mortgage paid through that period, which was really, really cool.
Yeah.
To have, the community still engage and pay artists for different collectibles. So that was really wicked.
Yeah.
And then, when you have people that work on shows and send you things, then, what you learn and what you kind of experience as a prop replica and what you see is like the subtle details that make it screen accurate versus not, and lots of things. It is such a world that you can just deep dive into quite heavily and never come out of.
Absolutely. And I think, we chatted a little bit about this when we met for the first time, talking about how, one of my side things that I haven't really kind of uncovered enough about, but is my own personal interest in props and prop making and things like that, which has been super interesting. So this whole world that we're talking of here is so fascinating. And I want you to kind of go into as well here, as we're talking about Star Wars props, is you mentioned it in what you first started to say in this conversation of Star Wars, specifically the original trilogy, pioneered so much in filmmaking, but also specifically the prop department, art department did so much for film. I want to know your thoughts about that, and that's a statement, but unpack that for us a bit.
The reality is, if George Lucas hadn't done what he did, be it with with Star Wars or with subsequent movies, with his relationship with Spielberg, and we wouldn't have cinema that we have today. That's the reality of it. And George Lucas was, you can say a lot about his script writing and a lot about various elements that that are super corny and various things, but he has an amazing vision of telling narratives and really powerful stories that are really, really simple. And ultimately, like he's got this amazing vision that he was able to see how something could be translated into film. So he created, for those that don't know, many of you will, he created Industrial Light and Magic to make Star Wars. So it's now one of the biggest VFX houses in the world. But at the time it didn't exist. Like, this industry for VFX was, people in their basements making models. It wasn't a professional endeavor. So Industrial Light and Magic, basically what happened is he said, okay, I need all these models. We're going to make all these incredible costumes and various things. I need people to do it. And he found some incredible people around him. There was John Dykstra and some incredible producers and various people that found all these misfits from, art school or engineering college or, super weird, nerdy electrical engineer, camera operators, and they meld them all together in this space, made Industrial Light and Magic. I mean, this is a very oversimplified version, and just completely changed the game when it came to not only producing everything from maquettes through to the puppets, stop motion, but also like camera equipment. Like there was the Dykstra Flex, which is what was, he made a camera to produce shots in Star Wars, which then led on to development in technology for future films. I mean, it's absolutely mind-blowing, that era. And they had basically a giant warehouse, which was, just pieced together from scrap wood. And they made the entire, franchise of Star Wars, particularly the first one, A New Hope. And, there's George, I think his biggest thing is he's an amazing HR scout. So finding great people to surround himself with. And maybe you know this story, like even Marsha Lucas, his ex-wife. I don't know if you know much about her.
It's some, I know bits, yeah.
So she's an amazing lady, and she was on the original New Hope movie. And there was one point in the editing, because the whole movie was a disaster in the edit the first time round, because the edit house that were editing it just didn't understand the vision. Like they were still trying to make a 50s, 60s traditional cinema piece. So Marsha Lucas came in and she re-edited A New Hope. And, she was working closely with her husband at the time, George, and he at one point wanted to get rid of the Force completely from Star Wars. Like it was going to go. Wow. Like completely go. Like it was just going to get cut from A New Hope and from the recordings altogether.
Wow.
Yeah, which is wild. And Marsha stood up for it and said, you can't do that. It's absolutely ridiculous. Like, we're going to leave it in, and this is how we're going to tell this story of the Force, and basically rebuilt that narrative. And she's responsible, Marsha Lucas, incredible woman, for the Force still being in Star Wars, which is mind-blowing thinking about it. So he had really great people around him. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then, the models and everything, I mean, it led on to Jurassic Park. It led on to, obviously, we've got E.T., we've got Indiana Jones for movie making. I mean, the whole gamut of it. Alien, as another example. Predator.
Yeah.
It wouldn't have happened. So it's very, very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It is such a process. And I think the story of not only George Lucas as a creator, but the ILM crew, that original crew, which is this band of misfits. I love that, how, Star Wars is kind of that story of, you're finding out who you are and becoming your own person and being confident in that. But then also the real world story of Star Wars is that as well, of, pursuing creative dreams and all like that. It all fits together so well. I love it. I love it.
You're absolutely right. It really is. It's yeah. But yeah, the makers, it's really that for me. The interest, the collecting is all to do with creatures, behind the scenes, the characters, the styling, the clothing, the wardrobe. I love the stories, but it's the world building, that's really amazing.
Absolutely. I want to tap into that a little bit, because I mean, we got a very good looking Salacious Crumb back there, staring right into the camera.
And give you a little, I've got a wider camera I can show you guys.
Yeah, give us a, oh my God, that was so good. Look at that. At that.
So we got 3PO over here. He's in the far right-hand side. He's a half-sized C3PO. There's kind of like 4 sections in the room that have like lots of action figures, so hot toys.
Yeah.
I can zoom into one of those.
Oh my God, yes. Yes.
So these are
so
like,
good.
This is the prequel hot toy display.
Uh-huh.
So I again, kind of working in photography, like I'm really interested, portraiture, particularly in group portraits, like I'm really interested in how to curate people and things. And, one of the biggest things for me in the displays is trying to get the heights of the characters correct in terms of how they go, the proportions with each other, how they work, how they display, and the sizing. Because it's really subtle. Like you could have a figure that is like an inch taller, and it might look off. So you have to play with heights, with plinths and various things. And it's exactly the same with portraiture or with groups of people, how you kind of create heights and tiers, and kind of, you're just trying to get people, when they look at something, to follow a narrative. Like you want them to have a focus and then to be able to explore from that focus. So curating things like that, I love. So the whole room has these little moments of curation, and I'm not really big on, for the action figures, like super dynamic poses. Like I really love the displays to look like a really weird family portrait. And just
absolutely.
super static, and just like showing all the intricacies of the characters, and the intricacies of their design, of their armor, or, their robes or whatever it might be. So
yeah, absolutely. Is there, I mean, in your own collection now, is there a particular character or creature that you really have loved to, you have in your collection, but then also just to work with and play around with and try and set up in the best way? Is there a favorite that you just thought, this is so quirky, this is so cool?
Yeah, there is. There's a company called Regal Robot that make, they essentially started making replicas of the Industrial Light and Magic creatures, but they've done a few different things. I'll see if I can bring it up. So you can see in the bottom the Rancor, and then there's the Tauntaun maquette as well down the bottom. So what they've basically done, Regal Robot, is they've gone into the archives, because they get access to the Lucasfilm archives, to go and scan and remake these pieces, but they've done a maquette range, and the maquette range is really, really special because it's basically the process that the Industrial Light and Magic makers went through to get George Lucas to sign off the characters. So what they did is they made these tiny little maquettes, which are like little prototype puppets, and they would mold them out of clay, and they would be mounted on little wooden blocks. And then George would come around and, they'd pitch him their character, and then he would say, yes, no, let's change this, let's change that. So as an example, there was like 4 versions of Jabba the Hutt before we got to the Jabba the Hutt that we know. And one of these versions of Jabba the Hutt is like a 4-legged, armed, weird, googly, like amazing troll thing, which in my mind is like, the design of that should have been Jabba the Hutt, but I'm sure lots of people would disagree with me. But they're essentially producing replicas of these maquettes. So that's my favorite line, because it has complete lineage back to the original prop makers. And what they're doing is they're finding the original prop makers, because a lot of these guys are really hard to find. Like they're in the 80s, 70s, 90s now. And they're getting them to sign plaques to go with the maquette range. So this maquette range from Return of the Jedi is really building into this beautiful little piece, and it's really awesome. I can get a close up if you like. It'll just take me a second to
let's do it.
But I can do it.
Let us do it. Yeah, 100%.
I think I can get this to work.
I love this. This is the BTS that we wanted. This is fantastic. Oh my goodness. This is, what a thrill. What a thrill this will be. If you're an audio listener, this part of the show, maybe definitely check out the visual of, oh my goodness, here we go. The in-person walkthrough. Beautiful. So there's that maquette range of those concept figures. Fantastic. You get the Weequay, you get Java down there, Max up the back there. How stunning. And all the chess pieces on the left is there as well, if you know it. And there's the little maquette heads as well, some alien heads. And of course, that's Phil Tippett's signature with that one as well. How cool. Oh, so cool. These are epic. And that's the chessboard. Those are the chessboard pieces in real life. They're not hologram. Wow. This is so cool. That is epic. Oh, man. I think I did a good job commentating with the footage.
Good one. I'm sure you did a great job, Han. What a collaboration.
I did that was good.
Dodgy, shaky camera and commentating. I love it.
I love it. It's all about the experience. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
And
But
I
yeah, the
also wanted
maquettes,
to,
they're really
yeah,
special.
and is the maquettes the same as, which I assumed that's what you showed there at the chessboard pieces, the characters for the
So
chessboard?
yeah, so the whole chess set, the Dejaric set,
Yes.
they're not maquettes, they're actual one-to-one replicas of the stop motion puppets. So
Yeah.
the
Wow.
that set is signed by John Berg, Dennis Murin, and Phil Tippett, which are
Mhm.
three now Hollywood legends that
Okay.
have basically produced most movies that your viewers, myself, you would have watched and loved.
Mhm.
And that is a one-to-one accurate replica of those puppets, so scanned from the originals. They made 77 sets in the world to mark A New Hope. And then
Yeah.
the two little creatures that you saw on the front of that, they were actually made in 1977 for the movie, but they didn't appear until Solo, a Star Wars story. And they're the two
Wow.
little, if you can flick back to that at some point,
Yes.
the two little aliens disappeared from Star Wars history until Solo, and then they appeared in that show. So this
Yes.
set has all of that in it, which is really, really cool as well. So the
Wow.
lost pieces. Yeah.
The lost pieces. That is incredible. That is so cool. And one thing a part of this set is, of course, the signatures from
Yeah.
the makers or people who have contributed to them. Talk a little bit about that. Does every actually I don't remember this. Does every piece have a signature? Have you got a signature for every piece?
Mostly. So a
Yeah.
lot of these collectibles they'll release in like a numbered edition, which will be like a limited edition, and then they'll do a more limited signature edition. So I tend to either get sent or acquire the signature editions because that for me is like a real one of the reasons like I like to collect is to have like this social history of the makers of Star Wars, not just the items themselves. So that is kind of coming right back to my interest in, like, for me, the set builders, the prop makers, the wardrobe departments, they're
Yep.
the real heroes of our films. Like the directors are great, do an amazing
Yeah.
job. The
Yeah.
camera operators are great, do an amazing job. But the production team is really where my love lies for film.
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I think specifically to the prequel trilogy behind the scenes and the hour long footage of those teams working in the different
Totally.
settings and on those movies is just I could watch those over and over again. It's so fascinating.
It's amazing. And the amount of actual, because there was a lot of VFX in those movies in terms of green screens, and the prequels have been really critiqued over the years because of their heavy green screen use and what that did to acting performances and
Yes.
various
Yeah.
things on set. But what people don't know about those prequels is what you're describing. Like they had so many models that they made. Like, the pod racing stadium was a complete huge model that was made, and Naboo was completely made out of, papier-mâché and various other materials, and then, lit and filmed with all this amazing camera equipment. And they actually made more models, more maquettes, and more physical creature models on The Phantom Menace than they did on A New Hope. So
Yeah.
there is
Right.
more,
Yeah.
there's more maquettes for the Phantom Menace film that there are for anything else. It's really incredible. So
Yeah.
my wallet is completely terrified this year because it's 25 years of the Phantom Menace this year.
Yeah.
And Regal Robot, this company that are making the maquettes, are releasing some Phantom Menace maquettes. So I am absolutely doomed.
That has to be mostly and hopefully the collection of pod races, because to me that one of the marvels of Phantom Menace was just the array of creatures that we got as the pod racers that raced with Anakin.
Yeah, man. I mean,
is there a few in there?
Sabula is one of my favorite, Star Wars characters that's ever been around. He's such an ass, and I love it. It's so great.
Oh,
Yeah.
I love him. But yeah, I totally get that. It's the wallet. It starts shaking when those anniversary years come rolling around.
Yeah, it's a bit relentless, but it's good. I mean, I've got to a point with collecting now where I have the space that I have, which is, it's a big space. It's bigger than most people's collection rooms, but it's not endless. So as something comes in, something also has to head out. So it's really about narrowing down, curating, and just refining it, which, to be honest, it's equally, if not more, enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In terms of talking, I think again, I feel like I asked you this question, and I find this the most fascinating. But with your collection that you have now, what would you say is the most valuable? Maybe not even as money, but money might show it. But valuable in terms of just rarity, price, everything of your collection at the minute. What would you say that's on?
So the Rancor that we saw down the bottom briefly, so that's a 1-to-1 replica of the actual puppet that was in Return of the Jedi. So the only difference between this and the puppet from a sculptural perspective is the puppet had a placement in the back where a hand would go, because it was actually a hand puppet, that Rancor in that scene.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So it has a complete back, this replica, but it's signed by Phil Tippett, who sculpted that Rancor. So that's a very rare piece. There was 80, what year was Return of the Jedi? Is it 83? I think 83.
83, yeah.
So there was 83 of those made in the world. But they're very, very fragile, and a number of them broke in transit. So there's not 83 around.
Imagine if you got one of those ones. Oh, man.
I had a friend of mine in Australia that, to give people context, if you're looking at collecting, like for these items, the Salacious Crumb here as an example of the Rancor, you will order it and you will wait anywhere between 12 months to 3 years, depending on the company, for that piece to be manufactured. And you can pay them off over on payment plans during that period. So a lot of the time, like, you will have monthly payments come out over a couple of year period, which is the only way a lot of people like myself can afford to collect items like this. You have to be really diligent with your budgets and not committing to too much at a time. That's the biggest one, because, you don't have $100 a month. Sounds okay and manageable until there's 5 of those commitments that are coming up. And so the Rancor, really rare, but probably one of the rarest. And I should say there's 2 types of collectibles as well, or 2 broad types. There is licensed replicas or collectibles, which is basically endorsed by Lucasfilm, and they have the stamp of approval to be manufactured. That doesn't mean that they are accurate collectibles or replicas. That just means that they've paid a license fee to Lucasfilm.
Right.
And then there are what's called fan-made or unlicensed pieces. So Regal Robot is a licensed company that make probably some of the most accurate collectibles in the world. But equally, like Hasbro Black Series, which do some phenomenal collectibles at a really good price point. And they're licensed, but sometimes they have some inaccuracies to them.
Yeah, right.
But the price point is incredible.
Yeah,
100%. And then the fan-made stuff or the unlicensed stuff is usually more accurate, but it doesn't have the price tag or the rarity because it isn't licensed and it doesn't have an edition. If that makes sense.
Right. Yeah,
so
gotcha.
the Rancor is rare, but the other piece in my collection is I have a Revenge of the Sith Darth Vader helmet, which was made by a company called Master Replica in the early 2000s. And there was a couple of hundred of these made, and it's signed by James Earl Jones. So the OG Vader voice.
So cool. Yeah.
And Hayden Christensen himself. And it's made from the original molds of the helmet used in Revenge of the Sith. So they made these replicas from the screen used mold. So it's one step away from the screen used item, which is really, really cool.
That's unreal. That is so cool.
Yeah.
Well, actually, it is real. It's almost too close to real. It's not unreal. That's amazing. That is so cool. And to get both of those signatures on there is
it's amazing.
So good.
But to give you some context of price, like When they were new, that helmet was around $750, which at the time was a lot of money.
Yeah.
But they sell now for $10,000 for that helmet. Yeah. And what generally happens with higher end collectibles like this, the stuff that I've collected, if it's low edition sizes or it has those signatures or the companies no longer manufacture them, over time things accumulate. So, if you do get into collecting, if you're smart about what you collect, you can, you can keep things in your collection for a certain time, and sometimes you might get bored of a piece, but that piece might have accumulated a little bit, and you can then trade into a couple of other new pieces, and that's kind of a strategy you can use to kind of get started if you're patient. But collecting is years. It's because even to, like I said, sometimes it's 3 years to get the piece made.
Yeah, so, you got to commit. Like, that's a commitment to wanting that piece. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, that's so good. I love it. This has been so fascinating to hear this. Your whole process of collecting and getting pieces and forming this museum of yours that sits behind you. But one question I would really love to know of, and you've mentioned through the conversation that you're a creator, you work in the creative field yourself.
Yeah,
and that it already sounds like that Star Wars has played such a subconscious maybe, but also conscious role in that. But how has Star Wars shaped you as a person, but also as a creative in this way?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's not very subtle. It's very slap you around the head kind of impact, because I genuinely got into the creative industries because of watching movies and films. So I'm originally from, you might pick up a little bit my accent, particularly some of my vowels.
It pops up. Yeah, it pops up every so often.
Pops in and out. But I was born in the north of England in Yorkshire, and we didn't really have an art class in my school. We didn't really have access to any photographic equipment, any art supplies. Music was about the only thing that we could kind of interact with, and with that there was a lot of brass bands and various things which were really cool and I really loved, but it was very different. So film and movies through my dad in a younger year, when I was younger, really introduced me to cinema, photography as concepts, sound design, lighting, and Star Wars was a massive part of that, incredibly influential. So, the Terminator movies, Star Wars, Alien, Predator, all those kind of like 80s to early 90s, late 70s movies really shaped my entire career and interest in the career. And then one other really random film, which has nothing to do with Star Wars, but is like probably one of the most darkest, most brutal aesthetics I have ever encountered. And I encountered this as a kid, is Return to Oz. So it was The Wizard of Oz 2, but it is terrifying. It was pitched as a kid's film, but it starts where you're in a mental asylum with this poor young girl that's getting electrotherapy, and then they somehow transport back to Oz, and they find a chicken, and this chicken talks to them, and they become the best friend. And then on this journey with this chicken, they have these wheelers. So we don't have monkeys, but these wheelers, which are these squeaking four-legged, so humans on all fours with wheels as arms and legs, roller skating around, like laughing with face masks and just the most messed up stuff you've ever seen. So between, but amazing art direction. I mean, there's one part.
Good. The set design is so good.
It's so good. There's one scene in this movie where, I'm giving the whole plot away. Everyone has got to go and watch Return to Oz. This is one scene in this movie where there is in Game of Thrones where you have the room of heads that comes up at the end with, is it Cersei? No, whatever. In Wizard of Oz, they stole that from Return to Oz. There is a witch in that movie
wow.
that has a room full of heads that she can switch out.
Oh,
It's amazing.
fantastic. Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
So yeah, but movies, not just Star Wars in particular because of the creativity, but Return to Oz as well, which is very random, but actually quite a good film.
I'm intrigued now. I'm a little intrigued just to appreciate
You've got to watch
the design of it.
It's but it's really messed up. And just watch it with the premise that it was pitched as a sequel, and a lot of parents of my mum and dad's generation, when we were growing up in the 90s, they didn't know what they were telling us to watch. They'd watched The Wizard of Oz, and then this was the sequel that they put on for us to watch.
It's like, hey, watch this, kids. This will be fun. Oh, jeez.
You know.
Horrifying. Horrifying. Oh, my God. So good. Well, Luke, thank you so much for being here today. I have so appreciated your time. Did you want to shout out your social medias before we start to wrap up?
Yeah, you can find me on most socials, although this year I haven't been very active. I've been so busy with work, there's not been a lot out of me, but you can find me at that Star Wars Bloke on most platforms. And if you're on Facebook, if you're old enough to be on or know what that platform is, you can jump into the Hyperdrive Facebook group if you're interested in collecting. So there's a great group of people that just share their collections and help each other improve their collections, or you can ask questions and various stuff there. So yeah. Thank you,
absolutely. Anne. So good. Well, I'll make sure to drop a link to Facebook. Come on, man. We'll make a Snapchat group for the kids or something. I don't know.
I'm old. I'm definitely old.
Old school. We'll put a link down to it in the description of this episode, regardless of the social media platform. But again, thank you so much for joining, Luke. Appreciate you as always.
Thank you.